Hello, welcome to Signal and Noise. Welcome back. My name is Brian Lamar. Today is a little bit of a different episode. Between this and a couple of other podcasts, I've been doing this for a little over 10 years, I think. Today, I am flying solo for the first time. Had a guest back out. Andrew DeSillis is in Italy with his lovely new bride on his honeymoon. And so today's my opportunity to kind of just talk about a list of questions I've been sitting on in the back of my head for a while now. And I want to be upfront. I don't have the answers to these questions. That's kind of the point. What I do have is like 30 years of experience watching this industry, involved in this industry. I have some strong opinions about things, where it's headed. I have a genuine belief that these questions, we don't ask them often enough out loud. And these are important ones. So today I'm going to walk through a few questions. I think there's 6. Some of them may not be comfortable. Some might be urgent. All of them, I think, are questions the industry needs to sit with. And I might have a bonus question at the end if I have time. I'm going to have no idea how long this is going to be. So I appreciate you all listening. They're not gotcha questions. I'm not here to throw anyone under the bus, but I do think we've gotten a little too comfortable with a few things in our industry. And I think kind of naming some things out loud, hopefully it's worth something. And I want your feedback. I want your feedback on this format, these topics. Reach out to me. I'm easy to find. I'm everywhere. LinkedIn, email, text me. So let's get into it. Question number 1. Are we actually solving fraud, or are we just getting better at measuring it? Or are we actually just getting better at convincing people that we're better at measuring it? Most people, if you're listening to this podcast, know that the data quality fraud vendor landscape has gotten very busy. You have Imperium, which is the old dog, been around a long time, absorbed TrueSample a few years back, been evolving its relevant ID, fingerprinting, and behavior, machine learning, etc. You have Research Defender, Anura, Detect, purpose-built for market research, has behavioral signals. Verisol, full disclosure, ROI Rocket, we have a formal partnership with, takes a little bit of a different approach, focusing on blocking fake accounts, proxy-based fraud before someone enters the survey. You have Clean ID, cross-supplier deduplication is big. Sentry, notable that they're one of the few tools explicitly claiming to block AI bots, chat GPT-style automated completions from taking surveys. That's interesting. Should give you pause because it's a differentiator. Because of a tool differentiator in 2026 is we block ChatGPT from checking your survey, that tells you something about where we're headed. And here's a number I keep coming back to. I did do some research for this podcast, by the way. Fraud cost this industry an estimated $350 million in 2024. That's roughly 10% of the total incentive spend across the whole industry. And nearly 70% of all data quality flags and surveys trace back to some sort of fraud. So we have more tools than ever, and the problem is still enormous. I have conversations every day. We have internal conversations every day. We have teams working on this. I have external conversations with clients. I have conversations with partners, which makes me ask, are we winning? Are we just professionalizing our tolerance for it? And here's something I don't think that we talk about enough, and something that I'm actively studying right now. And it's not just that we have a lot of tools, it's that we're stacking them on top of each other, often without fully understanding what one is doing or how they interact with each other. In a way, it's kind of ludicrous. And think about how a typical study actually goes. Sample provider, us, for example, we're running multiple fraud tools simultaneously. At RO Rocket, we're currently running 3. Many have multiple layers, including proprietary, custom-built layers. Client then adds their own layer, sometimes 2 or 3 layers. The survey programming platform has its own quality checks and digital fingerprinting fraud dashboard baked in. And then we're trying to actively catch things within survey, both fraud and non-fraud, trap questions, red herrings, speeder, all kinds of data quality questions within the survey. And again, of course, the more traditional way, after the fact and post-survey cleaning. So in a single survey, you could actually have 6, 7, 12 different systems all making decisions about whether a respondent is legitimate, and they're not coordinated. I think that's the problem. They're not talking to each other. We're not blocking the same people. We know this. We know this from research on research. We did this with Case. Another company did it recently, evaluate all the platforms as well, a former company of mine. We do that as well. RR studies where we've run the same respondents through multiple platforms and looked at who gets flagged. what we consistently find is these tools have some overlap, but they also significantly diverge. Platform A blocks people that platform B passes, vice versa. Platform B catches things platform C misses entirely, which means that one of two things is happening. Either we're having false positives, real legitimate respondents getting removed because one tool's algorithm decided that they looked suspicious, or we have false negatives, actual bad actors of some sort of fraud slipping through because not one single tool caught them and they're ahead of us and they're smarter than us and they're one step ahead of us. And this matters enormously when you think about it through a type 1 and type 2 error lens. Every time you add a fraud tool, you're implicitly making a decision about that trade-off. More aggressive blocking means fewer fraudsters in most cases, but also means real people getting thrown out. And I really care about that. And if each layer of the stack is making that trade-off independently, the cumulative effect on your final sample can be substantial. You might be looking at 20, 30, 40% of legitimate respondents across the full sample plan, and nobody has clean visibility into that because not one single party owns the whole picture. That's a huge problem. It's an industry-wide problem. Sample provider sees our piece. We see it. Client sees their piece, and it might be different. Programming platform has different visibility. Nobody's really taking this whole stack from end to end. And so I'm generally in the middle of this, studying it right now, to this day. Today I'm studying it. And I think what we're going to find is that this multi-tool environment, which everyone has quietly adopted because more protection feels like more safe, may actually be introducing significant and largely invisible source of bias into research data. Not because these tools are bad, but because nobody designed them to work together. And nobody's accountable to this combined output. We block more people and we feel good about it because, oh, we're blocking more people and we trust them. And now I added another layer and I'm blocking more people and there's no fraud or there's very limited fraud. This is a problem the industry needs to reckon with, and I don't think we've even started really discussing it. So back to the original question, are we actually solving fraud? Are we professionalizing our tolerance for it? I'll add a corollary now. Are we solving it? Or are we building a system so layered that we've lost the ability to know what we're actually removing and why? The economics really hasn't changed. Respondents get paid to complete surveys. As long as that's true, there will be people, and increasingly machines with AI trying to game that system. More tools are not going to change that incentive. Stacking tools without coordination might be creating a whole new category of data quality problem that has nothing to do with fraud at all. How's that for number one? I'd love your feedback on that one. Number two, this is a little bit similar. Who owns the definition of quality? And does it matter that nobody really agrees? Who owns this definition? GDQ has benchmarks. SMR has 37 questions. They have AI questions now. Companies have a data trust score. Individual buyers have their own scorecards. I've personally been in a situation where a client used a fraud scoring methodology that removed over half of verified real respondents from a data set. Over 50%. Real people gone because the scoring threshold was set very aggressively. Not the type 1 error rate was off the charts. Not a quality problem. It's really a definitional problem, and that has real consequences for research outcomes. The industry has been trying to standardize quality definitions for decades. I'm part of committees today trying to do that, and we're just not quite getting there. And I think the more interesting question at this point isn't, can we agree on a standard? It's what happens when a major brand just decides for themselves. I was part of a major brand vendor day recently, and one of the questions was, what should they do? That was a question that they posed to the vendors that were presenting. What should they do? And one of the responses was they should create the standard. Walmart is publicly committed to paying more for validated respondents. That's a client using their leverage to enforce a quality standard. When enough clients do that, the market really starts to sort itself out. Providers who can demonstrate quality get the business. Providers who can't get squeezed out, which is maybe how this should all work. It means that the industry's failure to define its own standards might ultimately get settled by procurement departments rather than researchers. Is that what we want? I don't think this outcome is what we really want. Question 3, is synthetic data the industry's salvation, or it's really just a convenient excuse? And I want to be careful here because I think the honest version of this conversation is more nuanced than really most people are really having. Synthetic data is not bad. It's not inherently bad. There are use cases. I've seen them. I've seen it working. Niche populations, maybe rare disease patients, hyper-specific B2B titles, directional work where you need to move fast. This is legitimate. It's actually solving a real problem. but I think there are a few reasons why adoption may accelerate that have nothing to do with those legitimate use cases. First, price. B2B and healthcare research has gotten really expensive. A study targeting CEOs and IT decision makers at enterprise companies when you're using certain type of sample can run 300 to 500 or more dollars per complete, or even more. Those synthetic platforms can credibly model that at a fraction of the cost. That procurement angle writes itself. You don't need to believe in the methodology, you just need a lower line item. Second, poor quality in the real sample. I just talked a lot about that. And the dark version of this story is that if you're throwing out nearly 60% of B2B complaints after cleaning anyway, which is what the benchmark data shows that recently came out, then your actual cost per complete is on a real study is astronomical. Synthetic data could start looking less like a shortcut and more like damage control. The quality crisis we're in might be driving synthetic adoption faster than any technology pitch that could. We could be accelerating towards synthetic, not because it's better, but because the alternative is becoming just unreliable. Next, feasibility. Some populations we just can't reach. Sub 5% IR targets, very specific job titles, lots of B2B, DMA specific research, which is a regional specific research, which is huge in our industry. Rare conditions. They're not always solvable through traditional panels or even through a qual quant solution, low base size solution, no matter how much you're willing to pay. Synthetic augmentation is going to be a response to this problem. It's not laziness. Fourth, and this is something I'm more passionate about, it's interesting, lack of trust. There's been lots of public articles written outside of our industry about the lack of trust. Buyers increasingly don't trust that the humans they're getting are who they say they are. So far, I think most synthetic is showing their work. You know what it is, whether it's better or worse than uncertain proof on real respondents is generally an open question that the industry hasn't worked through yet. And I kind of want to leave you with this final point on this. Will the industry use synthetic data to raise the floor on quality or to avoid raising the floor on quality? Because those are two very different futures. And right now, I'm not sure which one we're building toward. Next question, is the researcher, this is a little bit different. Next question, is the researcher shortage of a crisis or a symptom of something the industry created? We talk a lot about this, the talent pipeline, university partnerships. We're part of the University of Georgia MMR program board, which we're proud of. I'm a graduate. Internship programs, and how hard it is to find good researchers. And I don't want to minimize that. It's a real problem. But I think we need to be more honest about what a market research job actually requires in 2026, because it's gotten objectively harder. I don't just mean harder in a there's so much more to keep up with kind of way. It's the fundamental skill set required to do this job well has genuinely expanded, and in some ways expanded into directions that are historically very difficult to teach at the same time. So let's start with qual quant. When I was in college, and I think this is still happening, there was a qualitative class and a quantitative class. There wasn't a blended methodology class. There wasn't how they kind of interact with each other for the most part. For the industry, you specialize on one or the other. Qual researchers did depth interviews and focus groups and ethnographies, and they did it really well. They still do it really well. Quant researchers designed surveys and ran regressions and reported quantitative findings. And these two didn't really coexist. Sometimes maybe collaborate, but mostly operate in separate lanes with separate career paths, separate conference tracks, and kind of different worldviews about what good research even means. And now that separation is gone, or at least it should be, because the industry has moved on. The business questions can be answered whether the profession has or not. A researcher today needs to know how to design a quantitative study that sets up a qualitative follow-up within the survey. They know how to interpret behavioral data alongside stated survey responses. They need to understand when AI moderated interviews are generating like genuine insight and when they're producing noise. The methodology is really blurred, and the researcher has to blur with it. The problem is that qual and quant have always been generally hard to teach together. Mindsets are different. Analytical, creative muscles are different. A qual researcher trying to sit with ambiguity and nuance and follow unexpected thread operates very differently than a quant researcher trained to reduce variance, report with precision, talk about statistical confidence. Getting both of those into the same person, the same researcher, and doing it well requires a different type of training program. And most universities and firms have historically offered not that. We haven't started that, and we're just now starting requiring it. And then there's an AI layer on top of that. A few years ago, I was hoping everybody knew how to code. I don't think you need to know how to code anymore, but you certainly know how to leverage AI on top of this. I'm not talking about how to use ChatGPT to write a report summary faster, although that might be part of it. I'm talking about understanding what tools are actually doing when they synthesize qualitative themes, being able to evaluate whether an AI moderated interview platform is asking good follow up questions or just kind of pattern matching to what sounds like a good follow up question. Knowing enough about how these models work to know when to trust it, trust the output, or when to push back on it. That's really barely existed as a job requirement. And now I think it's almost table stakes. And underneath all of this, underneath the hybrid methodology skills and the AI literacy, you still need to teach the foundational stuff. And that's something we've been very bad. And I'll get into that here in the next question a little bit more. But things like problem solving, critical thinking, the ability to look at research design and ask, what are we actually measuring here? Are we even doing the right thing? Is this the right way? The ability to look at a data set and notice when something doesn't add up before you give it to a client. How do you teach that? For a lot of researchers and probably a lot of people listening, that sounds kind of basic. That is not basic. Critical thinking and problem solving are really hard to teach because they necessitate a certain kind of intellectual discomfort. The willingness to sit with a question that doesn't have an obvious answer and work through it systematically rather than grabbing the first explanation. A lot of training options, training programs, university programs, I'm not certain that they build that muscle. They teach people how to execute a research process, really good, but not how to integrate one or interrogate one or how to question it. And then there's the foundational methodology piece, which I'll connect back with the accreditation question. When's the last time a researcher got a real deep education in probability sampling? If you're listening, have you studied probability sampling in the past 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Or survey error? Not just how to write a good question, but the actual statistical assumptions that we make that are behind what we're doing when we fill a survey and how badly things can go wrong when those assumptions don't hold. I wrote a blog about this, I don't know, a month ago, about we've been breaking these assumptions for a while. We continue to break them. Is how we measure and communicate margin of error in a way that's actually honest about what it means? Do we know what that means? And I'm not sure the industry is producing researchers who know what they don't know. And in an environment where AI tools will very confidently generate analysis that sounds authoritative and true, whether or not it's correct, that gap is going to be very visible very fast. So when I hear researcher shortage, I think there's actually two problems kind of bundled together. One is a pipeline problem. Not enough people or quality people entering the field with the foundational skills. The other is really more of a, I guess, is like a definition problem. The job has changed faster than our profession's understanding of what the job is. And you can't solve the pipeline problem if you haven't clearly defined what we're trying to fill the pipeline with, if that makes sense. We as an industry need to get honest about what a researcher in 2026 and 2036 actually needs to be able to do all of it. Qual, quant, AI literacy, critical thinking, foundational methodology, not as a wish list, but as a baseline. And then we have to build this training, the career incentives, the career path, the mentorship, compensation structures that reflect this reality. Because right now we're asking more of researchers than we ever have in a lot of ways. We're paying them like we used to. Next question. I've talked about this for years. Lots of people have, not just me. Why aren't we accredited? Why doesn't the industry require a license? Why doesn't market research? Why aren't we accredited? Think about professions that are accountants, lawyers, financial advisors, plumbers, engineers, doctors. Our panel, our B2B panel, takes advantage of those licenses because those are public information. They are accredited. They have to pass a test and do ongoing training. All of these fields produce information and recommendations that people rely on to make decisions. They're all regulated. You have to demonstrate some sort of competency, maintain credentials. You can lose your license if you commit malpractice. I mean, and think about our industry. We regularly inform billion-dollar product launches. Our industry shapes public policy. Our industry drives brand strategy. And to do it, to collect data from human beings, publish findings that companies and governments can act on, you need exactly nothing. A SurveyMonkey account and a LinkedIn page will do it. We see this all the time. And I know the counter argument, licensing can slow down industries, protect incumbents, raise barriers to entry. And I'm not necessarily arguing we need like a formal government issued license tomorrow. But what accountability mechanisms do we actually have? If someone runs a crappy study and publishes misleading findings, which we've seen, what happens? Mostly nothing. The reputational damage lands on the entire industry. There's no body that can pull their credential. There's no floor. Anyone can do a survey, mess it up, and all of this can happen. It happens all the time. Either it's publicly known or privately known. And look at our conferences, which I love. I generally love going to conferences. I'm going to 2 more this year. I've already been to 3. When's the last time anyone in our industry attended a conference session structured around earning continuing education credits towards maintaining a credential? Compare that with a conference for physicians or attorneys. A CLE requirement does for lawyers. There's a structural incentive in those fields to stay current on fundamentals because your ability to practice depends on it. So I want to ask out loud, when was the last time we saw a major conference session on probability sampling theory, measurement error, basic assumptions baked into how we do a Likert scale? This is unglamorous, not as cool as a lot of presentations I've seen this year around AI, synthetic data, moderated qual, all the cool things that we're doing. And I understand why we get the prime slots, but the foundation has been eroding because nobody's required to learn it, to maintain it, or be tested on it. That all the AI tools and fraud detection platforms in the world will not save the output. All of the venture capital money that's coming in our industry are not going to teach this. It's probably the last question. I'm going long. When does consolidation stop creating value? And I'll be a little quicker here. I've talked about this for years, but the M&A wave in this space is real. It's been happening for a long time. It's not slowing down. Press Ganey and Qualtrics just got approved finally. Rep Data's had a series of really good acquisitions, user testing, acquired user interviews. Similarly, raised $100 million for agentic twins. And the logic in these deals is not really about, it is about scale, bundling capabilities. Maybe they're combining qual and quant, what I talked about earlier, but also PE returns, which is fine. That's how capital works. But there's a version of this story that's a little bit more concerning, that's a little bit more personal. When the mid-sized independent firms get absorbed or left out of the conversation, the specialists, the companies that built their entire identity around doing something exceptionally well, you lose something that's hard to quantify. You lose the contrarians, the companies that are willing to say, we don't do that. Find someone else who does do it better. The researchers who built their career on deep expertise on some particular methodology or a particular population. Consolidated platforms optimize for throughput. They have to. That's what their investors require. And throughput and rigor are not always the same thing. History gives us some data points here. In almost every information industry that has gone through a consolidation wave, whether it's the media industry, financial services, healthcare data, right after consolidation, it looks like efficiency gains. And then eventually you start seeing the quality effects erode, the institutional knowledge that left with the acquired companies, the methodological diversity that got standardized away. And I'm not predicting doom. I genuinely think some of the consolidation happening is for the better. More capable organizations and companies and increased money or industry is an increased exposure, more money to hire, more money to do the fun stuff. Innovation is necessary. But I think the industry should ask the question clearly, at what point does bigger and more integrated actually mean worse for the research? And who's going to say so if the answer turns out to be yes? Those are my questions around consolidation, fraud detection, defining quality, synthetic data, talent gap, and accreditation. And I do want to be clear, I'm not sitting here with a scorecard of answers. I've been in this industry for a long time, 30 years now, and I generally don't know how this shakes out. It's an exciting time for us as an industry. I do believe that the questions are worth asking out loud in public by people who care about where it goes, because the alternative is the safe conversations, the AI hype, vendor showcases at a conference, surveys about whether researchers trust AI. We're going to see a lot of those. We avoid the structural stuff. It's basic human behavior. The structural stuff is where the actual future of this industry is going to be decided. If something here resonated with you, or you think I got something wrong, please, 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 and I generally mean that, reach out, find me on LinkedIn, text me, call me, email me, or come back for the next episode of Signal and Noise. And now the bonus question: do I even need Andrew DeSilvas as a co-host? If you've listened this long, I appreciate you. Answer is obviously yes, I miss him. He keeps me from going off the rails like this episode. I don't know how long this has been, but he adds so much value in terms of client development and client discussions. He wrote a book recently. Reach out to him if you're interested in that. The show's quality is much better when he's here and we're having this conversation rather than me monologuing, because he probably would have questioned some of these things. And we're not just been me monologuing on a soapbox. And I apparently have never been trusted to sit near a microphone by myself with no guardrails. So thanks everyone. I hope this was valuable. I appreciate you, and see you next episode.